Today, we'll dissect a particularly interesting project about life, love, and dreams, Florence. It should be noted that it's best to experience Florence without knowing too much about it, so if you haven't played it, make sure to try out the game first. It will take only 40 minutes of your time. In this particular video, footage was recorded from the Switch docked version, which properly conveys all the game's meaning through controller-based interaction, but I think it's best to experience Florence the way it was originally designed, using the touchscreen, which means playing on phone or on Switch tablet mode. And I do need to note that this is going to be a much more lyrical video than I usually do, but that only fits the nature of the game. My name is Stanislav Costiuc, I am a game designer, and this is my review of Florence, which we'll discuss as always with the help of my Stasocritic system, the first category of which is design. This is the most important category of my scoring system, as it is all about how an experience is created through interaction, which is why it's got a weight of 4. Now, of course, in many games we can't make a clear-cut distinction between different categories because everything is intertwined, especially so in Florence. If you take an abstract look at the title, it is essentially a collection of little, simple mini-games, only a couple of which have any semblance of challenge to them. But that is alright, because the point of these mini-games is to tell a piece of the story in a way that gets a particular emotional response from you. Let's take a look at the very first chapter, for example. Its purpose is to represent the mundane aspect of adult life. It all starts with an alarm that doesn't stop until we tap it. We get up and have to brush our teeth, swiping the toothbrush in different directions. We commute to office, mindlessly clicking on buttons on social media, after which we have a rudimentary mathematical task at work. Then our mom calls and she doesn't give up until we reply, and it doesn't really matter to her what we say as long as she speaks up her mind. Then after work, we eat some takeaway food, brush our teeth again, and go to sleep. All these interactions are what creates the story. We don't need dialogue, we don't need narration, we get everything that chapter tries to convey because we are the ones doing these mundane actions. I have always said that the main difference between games and other mediums is not just interactivity or lack of it, but the way we get an emotional response. In the movie, you get emotions through empathy by understanding what the person on the other side of the screen goes through. In games, you get emotions through projection by interacting with the mechanics. You don't just understand the person on the other side of the screen, you become them. And this is what happens in Florence. You become Florence. You brush your teeth. You mindlessly tap whatever button on the phone because it doesn't matter. You do this rudimentary task of finding matching number, and you feel everything Florence is going through because you are going through it as well. Which is why in the next chapter, when Florence reminisces about her childhood, the contrast works, as we now have a creative freedom to do whatever. A freedom that is taken away from us when we're forced to start doing math problems. We are Florence, and we feel what she feels. Now, I'm not gonna go through every mechanic of every chapter because that will just be me retelling the game and you get my point anyway, but there are some things that I want to focus on specifically. The number matching minigame is reutilized several times across Florence. The first time is in the aforementioned adult life chapter. The second time is at the height of our relationship with Krish, where the game just does the matching automatically, symbolizing how easy everything feels in this part of life. And then we have to manually complete that matching game again when routine starts taking over. But it's not the last time we see this minigame, as it will appear once more close to the end when Florence realizes that she can make a living following her dreams. And just by changing the surrounding context, the emotions caused by this matching minigame become much more positive. This is literally a character arc shown through a little mechanic. Another great way Florence shows character progression is through the talking bubble puzzles. At first, these talking bubbles are made out of many different pieces, representing how at the beginning of a relationship you have to try really hard to build your thoughts properly. But then it becomes easier and easier to talk to the person, to the point that at one moment the puzzle essentially solves itself. But then Florence uses this type of mechanic in different contexts, mainly for arguments. In one argument, you have to build your token points at the same time as Krish does, creating this feeling of talking over one another. But later on, in the big fight that leads to the relationship falling apart, there's no puzzles. There is just big, already complete token bubbles that you keep putting in the required spot over and over and over again. I suppose the biggest irony of Florence's design is that it feels like it's very simple, but it's actually not. When I'm saying things like there is a toothbrush minigame where you swipe with the brush left and right to showcase the routine of a daily life, the reaction to that most likely is going to be, well, yes, of course, that makes perfect sense. But it's an immense design challenge. Consider this, every action that you do in Florence needs to meet the following requirements. It needs to represent the current state of the main character's mind, it needs to tell a story, it needs to be a part of the character arc, it needs to fit with the flow of the narrative, it needs to properly represent the action mechanically, and finally, said mechanic needs to be tactile enough to work with touch controls. Shaking a Polaroid photo until it develops to then place it on a map as a representation of different events that happened during the relationship seems like a nice, simple thing, but trust me, the road to get in that moment wouldn't have been straightforward. And this is why, if you open up potential scores for the design category, feel free to pause if you want to read everything, I will assign a 10 to Florence. It is an exemplary game of its genre. Absolutely every action meets the requirements I've mentioned before, and all of them form together a whole story of life and love, not just narratively, but mechanically as well, because in Florence, the mechanics are the narrative. That was a good segue into our next category, context. This category is about everything that gives, well, context to players' actions, characters, plot, motivation, world, and so on. It's got a weight of 1 because most of the time context on its own doesn't necessarily define the experience, though of course considering how design and story are intertwined in Florence, it's really difficult to separate the two categories anyway. But for the purposes of this critique, we'll focus now on the narrative aspect of the equation. And what is the story of Florence anyway? It can be summarized very quickly. Florence, tired of her monotonous life, meets an aspiring musician Krish with whom she starts a blossoming relationship that in the end doesn't work out, but it inspires Florence to follow her dreams and become an artist. It's a simple story. Some even call it cliché. You won't see anything here that you wouldn't see somewhere in real life. But that's the entire point. Florence is life, with all its highs and lows. Love and heartbreak, hope and dreams, parents that are overbearing but also loving and supporting, hurtful but also cherished memories. Everybody can relate to most of the things that Florence depicts. And sure, the story is simple, but is it implemented in a high-quality way? Yes it is. Every character goes through an arc, and I'm saying every because this story doesn't have only Florence and Krish, but also Florence's mom who grows to be accepting of her daughter's dreams. It is a little but important arc. The pacing is perfect, every chapter lasts as long as it needs to deliver its message and get the required emotional response. No more, no less. Thematically, the whole game is about the value of all these little moments that we go through and how they influence us and who we become. And most importantly, it's a story told in a way that can be told only through a game. The fact that it is always us going through this story of life and not just us watching somebody do it on screen is what makes the narrative really special. So I guess it is pretty obvious that the rating that I'm going to assign for Florence's context is at 10. And you know, the story may not resonate with you, and full disclosure, it didn't fully resonate with me either. But everything the story tries to do and convey, it does so in a high-quality manner. Plot, pacing, character arcs, thematic questions. It's simple, but it also has got depth and a lot of little details. And if all that's not a 10, then my whole scoring system is useless. Let's move on to aesthetics. This is another category with a weight of 1, as it's again about things that enhance the experience rather than define it, this time through visual style, music and so on. Now, I think it is quite obvious from what you see on screen and what you hear in the background that this game has a cute art style and nice music fit in it. What is more interesting to discuss is how all visuals and sound in the game work together with the mechanics and the narrative to represent the emotional state of Florence. And it's not just, oh, when she's sad there's no color and when she's happy there is color, even though yeah, it is that on a basic level, but it's more complex than that. The grayishness used in the beginning that shows monotone single life is different from the lack of color when Florence and Krish are drifting apart, which differs from how everything is dark when the relationship is over. It is all much more subtle in showing these emotional states. Likewise with color, the vibrance of childhood happiness differs from the one we see when Florence is fully in love, and that palette differs from the one where Florence finds her happiness after the relationship is over. If when she's in love the colors are really clearly defined and bright and accentuated, when she's happy at the end there is more of a pastel tone to them. The music of course accompanies the appropriate mood of the situation, but my favorite utilization of sound is probably during the arguments between Florence and Krish. Listen to this. Every character has their own instrument that plays when they complete their bubble, and that's what actually creates the disjointed musical arrangement of the argument. This is really cool, and there's tons of little details like this, how the music that Florence hears outside is the only colorful thing in her monotone life, or how mechanics, visuals and sound all work together when Florence recovers from the crash. So all in all, I will assign a 10 to aesthetics. There is a lot of polish and attention to detail and how it all works together with the narrative. All of this brings us to the next category, Cohesion. So, Cohesion is a category for defining how well everything in the game works together and has a weight of 2. And I honestly don't have anything to add to this category specifically, because all video long I have been talking about how mechanics are the story, how aesthetics fit and enhance all that, and how all elements work together to create a particular emotional response from you. Which naturally means that when it comes to Cohesion, it gets assigned a 10. Now let's talk about my personal emotions regarding the game. This category has a weight of 3, the second biggest out of all, because emotional impact matters a lot. And considering how I've been praising pretty much every element of this game, you might think that I love it. But I don't. I think it's cute and I certainly have enjoyed it, but it didn't have any sort of impact on me. Maybe it is because I'm happily married and recently reached my 30s with a lot of stuff figured out already, but I wasn't exactly compelled by the story Florence tells. I liked it, I enjoyed it, I think it is exceptionally high quality, and as a designer I will use Florence as a potential reference if such a need arises. Will I ever replay the game? No. Will I listen to the soundtrack from the game? No, I didn't like anything enough to add to my playlist. Are there any moments that really hit me? Not really. This is why out of all scores I will assign an 8. I enjoyed Florence, and I will be honest, the first thing that I did after completing it was to give Switch into the hands of my wife and tell her to play this game, but it's not something that will really stay in my memories. Let's summarize everything. After all scores and their weights are taken together, Florence gets a final Stasocritic rating of 94. It is a fantastic little game. You can argue whether it's a game in the first place, maybe just an interactive story or something else entirely, but I'm not interested in such arguments. As far as I'm concerned, for the purposes of this video, it's a game, one that does what it sets out to do exceptionally well. And you know, Florence may not be to your liking, and that's okay. However, if this style of experience is something you are personally interested in, Florence will provide 40 minutes you will not regret at all, and quite possibly be really emotionally affected by them. Thank you all for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and press on the bell button. A special thank you goes to my patrons, their support means a lot. And if you'd like, consider checking out my campaign at patreon.com/Florence and the YouTube membership program. See you next time!